Okay, I'll wait a couple of minutes then. Restart the recording. Okay, there we go. So today I was going to talk about, and I want to have a discussion about retail in the internet days, but something else came up, and I decided to take advantage of it. So I'll push retail back to next week probably. But anyway, what I want to talk about is recommendation engines. That's what they're called, and I'm sure you've seen them in a number of different ways. Like for example, if you stream music, then you might pick a particular song, and the system will stream lots of songs that are similar to that. You know, people who like this song also like these other songs. Autocomplete is a similar kind of technology, not quite, right? But that one is going to do things like if you start typing this word and you've been using these other words up to this point, then the word that you want to use right now is probably this one, right? So it's actually very, very similar, but not quite the same technology. And here's kind of an example of how it goes. Like last night, God help me, I simply could not find the can opener, and I desperately needed a can opener. So I went to the store, but you know, can openers is not the kind of thing that you buy all the time, right? So I wasn't quite sure where to find one, and I was a little stumped. So guess where I found the can opener? Where would a store put can openers? Any ideas? Small appliances on a website. Well, that would have been quite fair. It was actually a real brick and mortar type store. Yeah, maybe small appliances. Like that wasn't quite there. Kitchen supplies. That's perfect, right? This was a grocery store, so I didn't have too many kitchen supplies. I did go by the place that had like spoons and stuff like that. I thought it might be there. Painting? Not sure why it would be painting. Maybe, right? Okay. It turns out that this grocery store put the can openers at a very, very convenient place, which was right next to the canned foods. So you see what they're thinking. You know, you take your little shopping cart and you gather some cans, and you go, oh, I need a can opener, and there it is, right? So it's actually perfect. It's opportunistic buying. Grocery stores are really good at that. And for example, you might discover that the sodas are close to the chips, right? Hot dogs might be reasonably close to ketchup and mustard and things like that, right? So they kind of know that if you buy this, you're also going to buy that. We might as well keep those things together, okay? That's an example of clustering, right? And clustering is when you go through some kind of data set, and the data set might be recent purchases, or it might be, you know, historical purchases going back, 10 years or whatever. And you can kind of look at the, let's say it's a store, a grocery store, let's say it's a bigger store like Walmart, and they can look at everything that people buy together in a single shopping visit, and they can determine that, sure enough, people who buy ketchup, or rather people who are buying hot dogs, are also buying mustard. Or maybe they're also buying sodas, right? Or sodas and pretzels go together. Some combinations that seem to occur a lot, and then that makes them put those things either closer together so that people can find them more easily. Sometimes they'll actually deliberately put them farther apart because they know that you're going to go to those two places. So there's two places you get to go to and find some third things that you can't live without. So that's what those things do. And Dylan here's saying, hey, what about doing this online? So when you shop on Amazon, and okay, so you might go to Amazon and actually see some ads for those products on Facebook, right? Yeah, that happens all the time, and I find it a little frustrating. I remember this was many, many years ago before I realized that this happened. I was actually doing some searches for a telescope because I was building an observatory. And I looked at some different kinds of telescopes, and I was doing my research on what I wanted to get. And all of a sudden, I started seeing ads for telescopes in the websites that I went to, right? And I thought, wow, that is really, really good luck, because here I am interested in this. And, I'm looking at like the news site, and there's an ad for a telescope. And for a moment, I thought, that's just not very effective, right? Because most people aren't buying telescopes. So why do they bother putting ads? It's just lucky that I happen to be in the market for one. And then later I realized, no, that wasn't luck. That was somebody being really smart and saying, this guy's looking at telescopes. Let's put some telescope ads in front of him, right? So that's yeah, marketing ploy, exactly. Actually, it's more salesmanship ploy, right? And it's a really good thing that they're trying to do, right? They're trying to give me information on something that I've already demonstrated interest in, right? Although it can be very frustrating because, you know, after I make my decision, I bought it, I don't need to see 20 more different kinds of scopes. It's like, been there, done that. They're already mounted, you know, it's over, right? So stop showing me this. But that's what they do. That's actually happening because of something else, and that's because the searches are going through Google, right? So I was using Google to find information, and Google is also serving the ads, right? So they kind of go, oh, I recognize this person. I know what they've been searching for. Let me just offer those kinds of ads to him, right? So again, it's related. It's not exactly the same. It's not clustering, but it is using information about you to put information in front of you, right? Now, a real direct example is when you go to Amazon. Let's say you're buying something, right? For example, let's say that you buy a musical instrument through Amazon, right? And let's just say you buy a violin for whatever reason, right? By the way, I don't recommend using Amazon as your source for violins, but what the heck? Let's say that you do. Amazon might actually give you some advice and say, hey, people who buy violins through our website also like to get a case, right? And you go, oh yeah, sure. You know, that's really useful. You know, I want to be able to carry my violin, and here it is, recommending this kind of case. You might say, oh, and people who buy violins are also interested in this music, you know, and here's some music you can buy. It's like, okay, well, you know what? Sure, I want that as well. They do that for a lot of things, right? You know, if you buy this, then maybe you're interested in that. Customers who looked at this also looked at these other things. Perhaps there are alternatives that might be better. Perhaps there are supplements, right, that might be useful, and so on. All of that is clustering. It's just simply looking at what people buy together, and what are clustering, to be honest, and I hate to tell you this, but what are clustering is people, right? You are similar to that person, right? And the reason you're similar is because you looked at the same kinds of products, okay? All right, so Amazon has kind of perfected that art, right? They're really, really, really good at it. And what came out this week was kind of interesting, which was that if you're following the news, you might have heard that London is currently having a problem with terrorist attacks, right? And so there's been a couple of incidents where somebody makes a bomb, and it's a homemade device, and they drive it to some location and they explode, and they hurt a bunch of people, right? Because, well, I don't know what people would do such a thing. But that's been happening in London, and it's a big deal, and they're trying to track down on those terrorists. So anyway, there are kind of certain ways of building bombs, right? And so a number of years ago, England was having problems with the terrorists in Northern Ireland, okay, that were blowing things up. And the explosion of choice was a combination of fertilizer, I believe it's ammonium nitrate, and some other ingredients like sugar, okay? I say this for this reason. The fertilizer, and not all fertilizer works, just a certain kind of fertilizer works. But that fertilizer is legal. I mean, you use it to fertilize your crops, right? Sugar is legal. You use it to, well, to make things sweeter and become ill. Then you have other things like chlorine, right? Which is actually perfectly reasonable because it's what you put in your hot tub or your pool to keep it clean, right? So you have all these devices that, or not devices, products. You have all these products that are perfectly reasonable products for you to purchase because they're useful around the home. And if you put them in certain fractions and do certain things, then you make, like a pipe bomb, okay? So So apparently there's been enough of this going on in England that Amazon's clustering algorithms has caught on to the fact that, for example, people who buy fertilizer also buy sugar. Okay. Um, and yes, that is the reason that you put a limit on counter medicine, right? This is perfectly legal, but hey, if you buy too much of it, then I think you're not really that sick. You're doing something else with it. Okay. So yes, it's kind of like that. These are things that by themselves shouldn't trigger any concern, right? But if you buy them together, then it's possible that you're making a bomb. Amazon went one step further, and it decided that if, for example, you put ammonium nitrate on your shopping cart, then it would say, oh, perhaps you're also interested in this. And that happened to be the other components that you need to be able to make a bomb, right? So this came out in the news that Amazon was doing that. And a lot of people are embarrassed, right? And I want to open it up to discussion. I actually want to hear from you guys, because I think there's a number of questions that this brings up. And let's just start with this question. Is Amazon at fault here? They can put you on a watch list, okay? You say they're not at fault. Interesting. How come? I mean, they're helping terrorists. Okay, so I have 2 votes for it's not Amazon's fault. I still claim they're helping terrorists. Okay, so it's analyzing patterns in purchases. It's objective, okay? They don't know the intent of their customers, perhaps, although they're sure willing to tell you what they think you should buy. It doesn't know what it is used for, quite possibly. Okay, it doesn't. There's a correlation between these items. It doesn't know the morality. Okay, so you guys are kind of giving Amazon a free pass. That's interesting. Okay. Should they alert police? Should they alert the law enforcement that, hey, so and so is could also be for chemists or engineers. Yeah, actually, I was preparing for this class, and one of the things I needed to do was find out exactly what kind of chemicals are combined to create these bombs. And as I'm doing that, of course, I use Google, and I'm thinking to myself, there's going to be a knock on the door in about 5 minutes. So yeah, just because you're looking up information or buying certain things does not mean that you're a criminal, right? Only if they buy all of it. Well, maybe. I guess you mean all of the items in combination, right? Anybody know the TV channel ID? Okay. They show what I can only consider stupid criminals, right? If that's not redundant. And they commit a crime, and then, God forbid, they get caught. And I've seen so many that is like, oh, they bought all the things that they needed to commit this crime at the Walmart that is 2 blocks away from the location of the crime scene. Surprise, you were found. Yeah, if you do that, then maybe you are asking for it, right? Okay, some of you think that it's not their job to provide this information to the authorities. Okay. They can't disclose the purchase records because that would violate privacy policy. Yeah, perhaps, right? Although I would imagine that if you bought a book called How to Make Bombs, as well as a whole bunch of bomb making equipment, shouldn't that trigger something at Amazon saying, this person might actually be dangerous? Right? Or imagine that Amazon knows that one of its customers is a teenager, right? And they start buying guns and ammo, right? And perhaps some of their other purchases might lead Amazon to believe that they are being bullied in school, right? And you think, oh, this could be a school shooting type situation. Does Amazon have any obligations here? Yeah, there's the hunters. That's true. I know. I know. Okay. Yeah, people who can make weapons. I like that. Yeah, 18 plus sign for that stuff. Are any of you over 18 or at least 18 or older? I thought I might have a senior. Yeah, somebody's close. Why would you be buying ammo online? I don't know. Just because it's easier. Maybe you're less likely to get found out if you go to a place where you can have to sign for it and background checks and so on. Oh, we can also do it without Amazon, right? We can hide it, but that's different story, right? I'm talking about well, good job, guys. Okay, so it's interesting. I see a lot of people really think that Amazon is not quite obligated to help. Okay, that's um, that's fine. Um, what kind of um, I guess I want to think of it slightly differently. Suppose that the person who bought those things really was a terrorist. Okay, um, and it always comes up after the fact, right? We find the guilty parties, we go into their computers, and we discover that they actually did buy all the ingredients through Amazon. Maybe we discovered that they used Google to do search for all the information they needed to know, and they planned all this online. Let's say that actually happened. Okay. Um, does that give you any kind of desire to say we should be able to connect those dots early, right? Perhaps Google has an obligation that says if you search for information about things that are illegal or possibly illegal, then perhaps they should let somebody know that they should be looking at you, right? That doesn't mean they need to send the police to break down your door, right? That just means that maybe the FBI counterterrorism unit should have you under radar so that they can start looking and saying, is this a terrorist in the making? Should that be happening? Is that Google's obligation or Amazon's obligation? And I do think dumb and criminal go together. Okay, so you guys aren't quite buying that. All right. Um, Now, what about civil liability? Okay. Um, Suppose, for example, that Amazon sells you bomb making equipment. You use it to blow some building up. Can the owners of that building go after Amazon and say, "Hey, this was actually your fault, right? So you need to give us money"? I'm not talking go to jail. I'm just talking money. They have a lot of it. Boy, tough crowd.
Good.
The criminal purchased it. Yeah, that's true. But Amazon sold it. And they could tell from your history that you were interested in blowing things up. I mean, remember, they know what books you're reading. So maybe you've been reading books that are promoting anarchy and violence.
Have you gone on and signed up?
I know they're very confused about my books because I buy for several different people. So
I've tried.
they're like, okay, so I know you're interested in math books and comic books and astronomy and what is this, a French book? So they have very weird suggestions for me.
I'm in the class.
Gotcha. I'm just trying to meet with seniors real quick, make sure you're
Okay. Interesting Hayden's point here. Everyone has a right to privacy. Even if they're a potential criminal, right? You said even if it's a criminal, that's a little tough. If you are suspected of a crime, then the police can probably get a warrant to look at stuff, right? So and I saw that suggestion earlier. So it's not quite until proven guilty, right? They can actually search your property before that. But yeah, okay. All right. Well, it's nice to know where the class stands. that's one of those issues again that comes up just using computers, right? Because we never had this kind of uh, readily available source of information, right? It's not like, I mean, today, at least in principle, the government, whether it's England's, right, in the case of London, whether it's ours, could go to Amazon and say, hey, I'd like to know about all the people that are interested in these kinds of books, this specific books, that can go to Google and look at Google searches. Something else that Google does, this is another one of those that came up very, very recently, as in the last week. I told you that Google sells you ads, right, based on things that you search, right? So when you go to another website, it looks at your history and searching, and it says you might be interested in this. The people can actually buy ads based on the results of searches. So, for example, if I sell maternity clothes, right, and somebody Googles for what to expect when you're expecting, right? So you're looking, this is somebody who is going to be a young mom to be, right? Then perhaps it's a good time to show that person some maternity clothes options, right? So I could buy those certain keyword phrases and say, if anybody searches for this, show them my products, okay? And some people did that. Unfortunately, the folks who were doing that were white supremacists. So, for example, if you search for some phrases that might be anti-Semitic, then you started getting certain ad placements that, well, I guess these aren't very nice ads at all, right? But again, it's just using the technology in that sense, and it's making Google look rather poorly, right? It's like, really, you're making ads available to white supremacists? What's going on, right? So that's happening too. Again, I want to ask you, are you okay with that? Is Google in any way wrong for doing this? And I mean wrong, I guess, in a couple of different ways. One of those is liable. Can I sue them? And yeah, neo-Nazi recruiting ads, exactly. The other thing that is a moral obligation, right? Even if it's not a legal obligation, do they have a moral obligation not to do this? What do you think? Okay, so I'm seeing some cracks in the armor here. Perhaps this is not precisely controllable. There has to be some oversight to prevent this sort of thing from happening. Okay, all right. That's something to work on. I don't understand what you mean by Google will not prioritize traffic. What does that mean? What are you trying to say? Okay, so they will not refuse to show your ad if they disagree with it. Okay, I see where you're coming from. This is something we talked about a couple of weeks ago, I think, and you might remember the Charlottesville things that were happening. Okay, I almost want to call it a mob, and that was when white supremacists decided to stage a protest. Other people decided to counter protest, and whatever reason, the protest became violent. Okay, and many internet companies actually said, hey, we are against white supremacy. Good idea, right? And therefore, for example, if you try to bring up a website that promotes white supremacy, we won't let you do it through our system, right? So that is exactly the opposite of this not prioritizing traffic, right? I mean, they were actually saying, these guys are bad, so we won't let them put their website on our servers, right? Um, what do you want? I mean, what do you think about that? Is it a? I mean, I'm seeing a little bit of an inkling of the thought here that that this shouldn't happen, right? It shouldn't prioritize traffic, so we shouldn't say nope, white supremacists can't do it. On the other hand, I'm also seeing, well, there should be an algorithm not precisely controllable, but some oversight to prevent, you know, not promoting, but at least enabling um, things like anti-Semitism or white supremacy to happen, right? So what the heck, right? So, we like net neutrality. That was the context we had it in, right? We can't pick and choose when to use it. That's one of the problems with those kinds of policy statements, right? You know. Okay, what else? Easy enough to get around? What's easy enough to get around? Sorry. Well, I'm waiting to hear clarification on that. I kind of want to bring this up because this is what I want to close this discussion with, and that is something that was brought up at the very beginning, and that was the idea that Amazon, when it was doing its clustering, right, must have been kind of neutral, right, or fair. Definitely not biased. I think that was the word that was used. Okay. I want to try to challenge back a little bit on that. Okay. And here's the reason. Let's say that Amazon is not looking for terrorists. It doesn't even understand the concept of terrorism, right? It's just doing some kind of pattern matching that says that people who do this buy that. Okay. Now, one of the things that Amazon might keep, and I don't know if they do, right? But let's say that they keep this information, is how much money you spent at Amazon over the last 5 years, for example, right? Or last 30 days or whatever it is. That would make sense because they want to keep track of who are the really good customers, right? The ones that keep coming back and buying more and more stuff, right? Okay, so they might actually have some kind of a way of guessing, right? Whether what kind of socioeconomic background you come from. Do you have lots of money that you're spending on Amazon, or do you not have a lot of money that you're spending on Amazon, right? That doesn't actually nail your socioeconomic background, but it's going to be highly correlated, right? The more spending money that you have, maybe the more that you're spending with them, okay? So what that means is that even if they're not, quote, biased, right, their algorithms might actually be favoring rich customers over poor customers through no direct control, right? It may have to also to do with the cities you're in, right? It may have to do with all sorts of kind of subtle things that aren't actually about race, aren't actually about gender, aren't actually about money, right? But end up being about any one of those things, right? So you could be biased in kind of a second order way, not directly, but by something else happening. And if you simply assume that because a computer did it, it couldn't have been biased, you might be letting kind of implicit biases continue to happen, right? Some people say that's true about like standardized testing. I mean, I'm sure you guys are intimately familiar with the ACT and the SAT, right? Yeah, I hate that stuff. Yeah, I'm with you. My son's going through it right now, so yeah, it's a blast. Yeah, but it's a rite of passage for American teenagers, right? Is to take these standardized tests to get into college. There is some evidence that perhaps these things are racially biased, right? And there's nothing in the test itself that says, you know, my race is, click here. Oops, sorry, wrong answer. We're not going to let you into college, right? It's not you know, explicit like that, but it might simply give you a reading passage that if you are from a certain segment of American culture, you can read just fine and understand. And if you don't belong to that segment of American culture, then you're like, what the heck? This makes no sense, right? And so it puts you at a subtle disadvantage, right? So yeah, who knows, right? You know, it's like, you know, how can this be biased? It's just math questions, right? But then you look at the questions and you go, oh, wait a minute. In order to be able to answer this, I need to know how trains work, for example, right? So and if that's not obvious, I'll simply share with you that over 100 years ago, the kind of typical question that students needed to answer for an SAT type problem had to do with like how much hay you could load in a certain train that had this much capabilities and so on. And if you didn't understand, you know, the weight limitations and the way that was of trains, you had no hope of answering the question correctly, right? It's just that because people back then were farmers, they all had that common knowledge, right? Which of course today you wouldn't. So that talks about that bias. Okay. And heck yeah, they all sell the personal information, and so there's that to be aware of too, right? So that's that. Anyway, I don't want to take up all the time talking about that today. I did think that that brought up a lot of points that I want to continue talking about, you know, over this class. So keep thinking about those. Try to contribute to how those affect us. And for the rest of this class, what I want to do is I want you to try to finish that lab 2, okay, in unit 2. See how far we can get. And after that, I'm gonna do some technical stuff that's not in that curriculum, but that I think you need to know for this. So we'll do that next class period. Okay. All right. Any questions? Yeah. By the way, the conversation that I left in the middle was having to do with people's rights to speech and to get together in groups, right? The right of association without fear of reprisal, and that's pretty reasonable. You know, some groups I might actually want to join, right? Like you know, science fiction fandom clubs. I think they're a blast. Other groups I have no interest in joining, like the White Supremacists of America. But you know, I also don't, you know, I feel a little bit queasy, and it would be illegal for me to try to shut them down, right? Because they have their rights, even if they don't respect the rights of everyone else. That's the way our system works. Okay. Um, okay. Let me check on the assignments. Make sure that that is published. It is published, Unit 2.2. So it should be available. Let me know if there's a problem. You might want to take a screenshot and send that to me so that I know what's happening. Okay. And I think it should be there. All right. I'll let you guys work on Unit 2, Lab 2, and then we'll see.